Brian's Return, Chapter 8. So when we left off Chapter 7, Brian's mom had just brought him to the plane, and he was going to take off to go back to the woods. So that's where we left off. Chapter 8. Brian flew to Minneapolis. Minneapolis, whoop whoop. Brian flew to Minneapolis and changed to a shuttle flight to International Falls. He got in at 3 in the afternoon and found his canoe and paddles waiting at the airport. He called the bush pilot, who answered on the first ring, and told him to get his gear down to the dock by a store in Rainier, a little town on Rainy Lake near International Falls. Fun fact, I've been to Rainy Lake. Brian took a cab to the dock with all his gear. The driver had rope to tie the canoe to the rack on top of the car, said he did it all the time, what with all the people coming to the Boundary Waters canoe area. He waited on the end of the dock, and in an hour a bush plane with twin floats circled once, landed, and idled up to the dock. "Hi, Brian!" The pilot jumped out and tied the plane to the dock. "Good to see you again. Just put your gear in the back seat. We'll tie your canoe on the float. Won't take but a minute." In 5 minutes they were taxiing away from the dock. The pilot throttled back and moved down the lake a quarter mile to a small building beside another dock. "My shack," the pilot pointed with his chin. "I could have had you take the cab there, but the cabbies don't like the road. It's 2 miles through the woods and mostly mud. You got food?" Brian had been looking at the building. "Pardon? Do you have food with you? Thing is, the 2 fishermen are coming in early in the morning. I thought you'd stay here in the shack for the night while I go home, but there's no food here. I've got my Jeep there, and we can run and get you something if you need it." "I ate on the plane," Brian said, "and I have some stuff in the packs. I'll be fine." "Good enough." He pulled the plane delicately to the dock, climbed out on the float, and tied up the plane. "We'll be back early in the morning. I plan on leaving here at daylight 30, about 4:30. See you." And he was gone. Brian stood alone on the dock and looked at the shore. It was not woods, not yet. Here and there were cabins and docks with boats next to them, but there were thick trees and bird sounds and green. He'd forgotten how thickly green the northern forest is in the summer, and he let the sounds, the lack of noise, settle over him like a blanket. He stood there for perhaps 5 minutes, relaxing. It was coming into evening. He purposefully had not brought a watch or clock. They did not fit where he was going, and he had been only partially honest with the pilot. He had eaten on the plane, a tiny sandwich and some peanuts and a Coke, but he didn't have food with him. Instead, he had the ability to get food. He took his pack with the sleeping bag out of the plane and moved up to the small building. It was unlocked, and inside it was full of old engine parts and fishing gear. There was a couch in one corner, and he thought of sleeping on it, but the sky didn't look like rain, and the stink from the paint cans in the corner convinced him. He would sleep away from the shack. In one pocket of the pack, he had rolls of fishing line, small sinkers, and a plastic container of hooks. He had seen many small panfish, bluegills, and sunfish by the dock when he stepped off the plane float, and he rigged a line with a hook and sinker. Then he went into the trees, turned over a rotting log, and grabbed a half-dozen earthworms. The fish seemed starved, and in 10 minutes he'd caught 5 of them. He pulled the line, rolled it on a stick, and put it back in his pack. Then he cleaned the fish, leaving the heads on, scaled them with the back of his knife, and threw them in the smaller pot. The shore was covered with driftwood, and in moments he had a small cooking fire going near the water's edge on the small strip of sand beach. He added lake water to the pot, slapped the lid on, and put it directly into the flames. The evening crop of mosquitoes found him, but he threw some green grass and leaves on the fire. The smoke drove them away. He sat and watched the evening sun disappear over the lake to his left, and thought how truly and honestly right it felt. Once, when he didn't think he could stand being at home any longer, in the middle of the night he had taken the blanket off of his bed and gone into the backyard and laid on the ground. It was almost more than he could bear to be in a room without an open window. He had to feel the air on his skin, to feel a part of the outside. That night he had lain trying to see up at the sky, to the stars. There was too much city light to see much, but he tried, just as he tried to pretend the air in the yard was the same as the air in the woods. Now he spread his bag in the grass on the bank and lay on it. It was not dark yet, but close, and he could make out an evening star, and he thought of how people wished on them. He had never done it, but now he wished he could see it again the next night, and the next, and the next, and always be able to see it. He smelled his fish soup. It was nearly done, and he added a couple of pinches of salt from a plastic bag he had brought, and set the pot off the fire to cool a little. After 10 minutes, he took the lid off and used the tip of his knife and a spoon to peel the skin away, and then ate the tender pink meat along the backbones. He ate quickly, carefully avoiding the bones, and then drank the broth. He cleaned his pan in the lake and decided to put up his tent to avoid the night bugs. He'd brought a small 2-man tent. He'd thought of going without one at first, but the tent was very light and had screened openings, and the insects, whether he loved the woods or not, were awful. It took him 5 minutes to set it up and put his bag inside, but instead of going to bed at once, he put more driftwood on the fire and sat for a while in the dark. He was close now, not quite there, but very close. Tomorrow the plane would take him northeast. He smiled. He unzipped the tent and crawled inside and lay on top of the bag. For the first time in months, he was sound asleep within 5 minutes. Pretty cool how everything just kind of came back to him. He'd been gone for, I don't know if it was I think between 1 and 2 years. But he had been gone, and now he's back to catching his own food and cooking his own food, and pretty cool. Thanks, boys and girls. We'll see you back for chapter 9 next time. Adios. Bye.